Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to embark on a journey like no other. Welcome to the Glum Lot podcast,
your go-to destination for a unique blend of recovery and discovery.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Mark. And in this podcast, we will endeavor to create a safe and uplifting space for our guests and listeners to share their stories with sincerity and a touch of humor.
Remember, we are not a Glum Lot. The Glum Lot podcast is more than just a source of entertainment. It's a beacon of hope, proving that even in the darkest moments, recovery is possible. Every story we share carries the power to inspire positive change.
So buckle up, get ready to listen, and join us in discovering the strength that lies within every individual's journey. This is the Glum Lot Podcast, where humor meets hope. All right, Brad, welcome to episode number 57 of the Glum Lot Podcast.
Hello, Mark.
We are glad you are here to share our time together.
We are.
And we want to remind listeners to follow us on our Facebook group, the Glum Lot Podcast at Facebook. And also, if you have anybody you think might be a good candidate as a guest, or if you want to be a guest, please contact us at the Glum Lot Let me start again. The Glum Lot Podcast at gmail.com.
That one.
Great. So, what do you have on the agenda today to discuss?
Well, let's talk about something that I went through. I was in a relationship prior to being sober, and I was in a relationship after becoming sober, and that relationship changed, and I hear a lot about that.
Yeah. I know for myself, I was in a relationship when I was drinking, and when I got sober, the dynamics of that relationship changed, and it did not work anymore, and it had to end.
Yeah.
I think it had to end for both of us. You go through these changes, and the way that you act, think, and through the design for living that AA offers, you become really a different person.
And that can be drastic for people. I mean, think about it. We're being said that we're going through a psychic change. That's a complete change of mind.
Yep. And you know what? In some cases, that's probably a fantastic thing for a relationship.
Yeah.
In my case, it was just disastrous.
Mine, it was a definite challenge.
Yes.
No doubt. I mean...
And I know that... sometimes, particularly in a marriage and a family and everything, trust has to be re-earned. It takes time.
Yeah.
People got to know it's real and that it's going to stick.
Yep.
You know, all that stuff. So
it's
it can
a big
be tough,
adjustment.
Man. It can be tough.
Definitely. I mean, I went from a wild and crazy fun guy to pretty boring. You know, things don't get me riled up like they used to. No.
Yeah.
They kind of do, but not as much.
You know, it makes sense because if we are going through what they say is a psychic change, a complete change, of course it's going to affect the dynamics of a relationship because it's a two-way street.
Yep.
And if your way changes, the other person either has to change with it. And so a lot of times they probably want to, or they're not going to like it because it's not what they signed up for.
Yeah, and there's some really good readings. If you are a big book person and doing your 12-step program, there are some really good readings about this very subject in the big book. And it talks about how it's going to take a lot of patience, maybe sometimes a spiritual journey together, but not right away. You know, there's a lot of really good advice in there.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. It can be a relationship with children, a relationship with your boss at work,
absolutely,
friends.
Yeah.
Especially in the case of friends you had that were drinking buddies.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to change people, places, and things, or you're doomed to fail. So,
tricky subject.
Yeah, people may not understand a lot of it. Boy, it's good to have a sponsor when that stuff goes down.
Yeah,
right. Somebody can bounce it off and just say, "Am I crazy?" Or
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a good one.
Yeah. So we have a guest coming in.
Yes.
Through our new platform, which is over the internet.
Yes.
That should be pretty interesting. Make sure this works good.
Yeah, a little patience. You know, we're working out some of the kinks. You know, might have a little bit different sound to it, but we'll get there. That's for darn sure. Because, well, we're alcoholics and perfectionists and are hard on ourselves, so we try and make everything just right.
Who is our guest?
Oh, that's Alissa.
Alissa, okay. Yep. And we're going to be contacting Alissa by satellite.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So without further ado, let's welcome Alissa.
Alissa.
Welcome, Alyssa, to the Glum Lot podcast. We're glad to have you.
Hi, Alyssa.
Hi guys, thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
and so we usually want to start with a sobriety date.
Yes, July 9th,
Okay,
2017.
July 9th, 2000. So you've got roughly
Just
7 years.
7. Oh my
7
God, my
years.
memory's
Nice,
terrible lately.
nice. And so we like to start with your first experience with the effects of alcohol and/or drugs.
Like all the.
How old were you?
Oh, I think I was 14. I don't remember
Yeah.
specifically. I the first time I ever picked up any sort of mind altering substance, of course, I think I was 14. It was behind my elementary school.
Yeah.
And I was, of course, hanging out with the kids that my parents told me not to hang
Hanging
out
out with the bad
with. And
kids.
yep, and they had some uh good old fashioned dryer sheet weed.
What the
And
hell is dryer sheet weed?
You kind of have
Maybe
to
I'm
blow the
too
weed through the
old.
bottle. Is that it?
listen, that's the stuff that they used to get back in the 80s and 90s that they'd ship in and it would taste like dryer sheets when you smoked it. I mean, come
Really?
on. Everybody
Never,
knows
ever.
about that. Yes.
It would now was that because when they tried to ship it to fool the dogs, they put dryer sheets in with it?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's what people
well, that
used to
makes
tell
sense.
me. So
I never experienced that, and I smoked weed in the '80s. I never had any dryer
I guess
sheet.
mine was all homegrown and not imported.
Yeah. Well, you know.
maybe they only ship that stuff to
Oh,
Pennsylvania. I
that I
don't
did
know.
hear that. We called it Pennsylvania weed. We'd smoke it and go,
Yeah.
"Oh, Jesus, where'd you get this shit? Pennsylvania?"
Pennsylvania. Ah,
So you smoke a little
I
weed. Is
love it.
alcohol involved at all?
No, not that time. It
Okay.
wasn't. Nope.
Did you get high?
Uh, oh yeah, I did, and I remember thinking like I felt like I finally belonged because up until that point, I want to say I was in maybe sixth grade. Um, and I just, the huge, I never felt like I fit in anywhere, and I was always searching for the group of kids that would have me, and that was
Okay,
them.
so you
So,
found your people.
and dryer sheet
yes.
weed.
Nice. And so
Yes.
what about alcohol? How did that come into the picture?
So my first time drinking alcohol, I think I was 17 years
Wow, that's a
old.
long
Wow.
spread. So you were getting high for a
Yeah.
few years before you even drank?
Oh yeah, and I that's I talked to Brett earlier, that's a majority of my story is
Mm-hmm.
drugs and alcohol, but drugs mainly,
Yeah.
Uh, and it just kind of snowballed. I smoked some weed, I kept smoking weed, and then from there anything that anybody gave me,
So you
I
became kind
did.
of a garbage head. You'd try anything, do anything. What were some of the drugs that
Yeah.
you tried?
Well, I was big into Xanax
Some
back then,
bars.
from probably 17 to 20. I was taking Xanax, Vicodin, a lot of like prescription pills that I was getting off the street, cocaine, uh, methamphetamine. Um, and then when I was 18, I met a guy at a blues festival and we fell in love. And so after that weekend spending together, I like immediately moved in with him,
Of course.
like a good alkie. And he was big with pain
Mm.
pills. And so that was really when that stuff took off for me.
What were the
And
pain
it
pills like? Percocet, that kind of stuff?
uh,
Oxys, okay.
Oxycontin.
Yeah,
Yep.
boy, that's a tough one. So,
Yes.
did you follow the opiate kind of I know there's a thing where you start doing oxys, they're expensive. Everybody moves to heroin because it's cheaper and more plentiful. Was that your story? Yeah.
Bingo. Yep. You
And were you drinking through this whole thing too?
Yes, so I always drank, and then interestingly enough, when I started doing those harder drugs, heroin, the drinking really subsided because that was a much quicker effect
Mm-hmm.
for me, and I didn't have to taste alcohol, which I didn't particularly care
Hmm.
for. I always just drank for effect. And I always spent, I remember getting off of work and hanging out in bars, showing up at 3 o'clock and being cut off by 6 o'clock because I was so wasted. And that happened from, early because where I grew up, it was such a small town that I could get served in the bar when I wasn't of age.
Yeah.
Uh, so I was always there every day. But once the heroin, I didn't drink very much at all because I didn't have to anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Did heroin become your drug of choice at that point? Were you pretty much just
Yes.
doing heroin?
Heroin and
Holy
methamphetamine.
shit.
Yep.
So up and down? Oh
Yes.
my God.
Yep.
How did you shoot heroin ever or no? Okay.
Yes. Yep.
So you're shooting heroin, smoking meth, right? Did you ever shoot meth?
Shooting it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
What
Both.
when you're shooting something like meth, is the effect quicker and stronger than smoking it?
Yes.
Okay. Uh,
Much
so
Much
quicker.
quicker.
boy, so this
Yeah.
becomes your life, right?
Yeah. So my parents, both of my parents were also both drug addicts. Now, they were functional. You would have never known from the outside looking in that anybody in my house had a problem. My dad was a very big drug dealer in the area, selling meth, and my godfather as well, the two of them. So once 18 years old, I got arrested for the first time and I went to rehab because I knew that if I went to rehab, I may not get in as much trouble when I went to
What
court,
did
you
what did you
know?
get arrested for?
That time I got arrested. So I was driving my car, huffing air duster
Mm-hmm.
on Xanax, really smart decision. And I proceeded to, huff the air duster at a stop sign and then started driving. And as I was pulling out of our mall, I blacked out. I went into oncoming traffic and I hit a woman head on. Um, and I came to and I didn't know what happened. So I hopped out of my car and proceeded to like try to put the oil dipstick back in and like put everything back together. And I got back in the car to go to start it. And I realized my airbags were
Oh,
deployed.
yeah,
And I was like,
because you were just going to be on your
oh,
way.
Oh,
yeah.
um,
And this lady was screaming at me because she had her daughter in the car.
So the cops came. They knew you were fucked up.
Yeah, they
Okay.
knew. And I also didn't have insurance.
Oh,
So,
jeez.
yeah,
So you go
super
to rehab
important.
as a way to
Yep.
kind of navigate the system. And what's your
Yep.
experience like in rehab? Were you honest with them?
Yeah, I was always honest. I mean, I've been to 10
Okay.
rehabs. And I think my first experience was that I didn't take it very seriously. I mean, I was honest with them about what I was doing and how I was living, but I don't think I really had any intention when I got out of there, of doing any of the things that they
so that
suggested I should
experience
do.
wasn't didn't shake you enough to make you be like, oh my
No.
God. No, no, of
Nope.
course not.
Nope.
So you
And
what
they
is it, like a 28-day thing you do in rehab?
yeah.
So you get out and you go to
Yep.
court. What do they say?
They I'm trying to remember. So the judge, they did let me off. I ended up, I think I got probation,
Wow.
and a misdemeanor, and and I did end up going through the process of getting that expunged from my record. That particular
Was there
incident.
any follow up, any aftercare when you got out of rehab? Did you do outpatient? Did you go to
No,
meetings?
I think I went to like one meeting.
NA?
I did the whole AA
AA,
meeting I
okay.
went to. I did the old dip in, last minute, dip
Yeah.
out before anybody could talk to me. And I thought, I don't belong here. I was 18
Yeah.
years old,
Yeah, and it's a
you
bunch
know?
of old people and they're talking about booze and you're like, yeah, whatever. So you figure
Yeah,
I'm
pretty
gonna
much.
skate out of this one and I'll be fine.
Yep,
It's still
yep,
manageable in your mind.
totally.
So how soon after that did you fall back into trouble?
Oh,
Yeah.
immediately. I mean, at this point in time, I used with my father. I used with my brother. I have a brother who's 10 years older than I am. And my mom, she used, but that was like this it was just this big secret, right? Like I got high with my dad, my mom got high with my brother, but mom couldn't know I got high with dad and vice
Holy
versa,
cow.
So it was always like this weird dynamic in our house where everyone knew what was going on, but nobody would
Nobody
talk
knew
about
who
it.
was who, and
It's a little
Oh,
sick, but
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, and as my alcoholism and everything progressed, I'd go back, I'd say it would be the same cycle. I'd get arrested, I'd go to rehab.
Yeah.
I'd get arrested, I'd
What
go to
about
rehab.
what about
And
your parents? Did they get in trouble too? And your godfather?
interestingly enough, so not until 2011. So that they lived that way, long before I came
Yeah.
along. At one point, my dad and my godfather were both sheriffs. They rode horseback, and meth slinging sheriffs. And so in 2011, my godfather got busted by the feds. So the feds had been watching them. A lot of undercover businesses. I remember he had a bar, he had a auto body shop, and then he bought this big farm, and he had 100 head of Texas Longhorn
Nice.
cattle, and that was his
Yeah.
cupboard. And so,
So they're laundering money
um,
for all these legitimate businesses, right? And they are the
yes,
law,
yep,
so they're pretty protected. How interesting. Can you
yep.
tell me
So
how he got busted?
Well, so I'm not so what we think happened is somebody snitched because they came in. I mean, this farm is acres
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
acres of land, and they're surrounded by swamps, and they were posted all in. They came out of the
Was it the
woods,
DE? Was it the
everything.
federal government?
Federal
Okay.
government,
Uh-huh.
yep. And so they knew they had several underground safes throughout the past years of the
Hmm.
cattle, and they knew exactly where those
Oh, they
underground safes
did.
were.
Wow.
So it was somebody with
Yes.
knowledge on the inside of the operation.
Yeah, and shortly after that had happened, one of their doing quotes, farm
Hmm.
Yeah.
workers committed
Mm.
suicide. And so they think that that was him. Now, my father continued to sell after that
So
had
this was your
happened for a
godfather
few.
that got arrested, right? So what
Correct.
did
Yep.
he go to jail?
He did. They actually didn't lock him up right away, and I don't know why. They let him do whatever and then turn himself
Okay.
in. So my father ended up passing away in 2012. And I'm not even kidding you, 2 months before he died, he got
No
arrested.
shit.
Same thing. Yep. And
How
so,
old was he when he
uh,
died? Okay,
58.
so he died fairly young. What did he die of?
He had a lot of heart
Yeah.
problems.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Shocking,
and the
I
meth
know.
didn't help, I get.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
right.
he just
And
led a hard
so,
life.
yeah, and he ended up getting MRSA in his
Ooh.
blood, and it
Yeah.
killed him. My brother and I actually are the ones that found my
Mm.
father
Sorry.
deceased. Yeah. We were out copping dope and came home and found my dad. So I had a lot of guilt and shame about that for a really long
Sure.
time that I
Now, were
wasn't
you
there,
ever involved in the operation?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So you had
Yep.
inside knowledge of everything that was going on. So your life was basically a drug world life, right? Using,
Yes.
selling.
And I didn't Yep, I was selling for my dad, and when my dad got arrested, I remember my mom pulled the old, "I didn't know any of this was going on." And, I remember the chief of police looked at her and said, "Well, you should ask your daughter and your son because they've been selling for him for years."
Wow.
Did the cops talk to you? So
No,
they just really
never.
wanted him. Okay.
Yes.
So
Yep.
your father passes away. Does the drug business subside?
Yes, at that point, it
How
finally
does that
did.
change your
Yep.
life?
Well, in a lot of ways, I mean, my dad was gone.
Yes.
Uh, him and I were very close. I never really had a very close relationship with my mother. It was always, very
Hmm.
rocky. Um, and now that piece of it is taken away, and, I just went harder for a while, for a
Did
couple
the
more
fact
years.
that the business was shut down, did that curtail your access? to drugs or not at all? Or
Oh, yeah. I mean, for meth, it
okay,
did, yes. That was no
so you just
longer an
started hitting.
option. I mean,
Did
I
you just
tried
start
to
using heroin more?
found it, but
Let
yeah.
me ask you this because I've never really talked to someone in your situation, but so you're doing heroin and meth, and you're basically addicted to both, right? So when
Mhm.
meth disappears, do you feel that? Is there a withdrawal, or you just keep using heroin and there's no withdrawal?
Um, so with meth, I guess I didn't really experience it because I was doing
Yeah,
other stuff. Um, so it kinda
it just yeah,
filled
it
in the
just
gap,
filled in.
if
So
you
there
will.
was no withdrawal.
But I will say this, I watched my mother go through it, and I remember her just sleeping for days and days and days, and very,
Now,
irritable.
how old were you when this all happened? With your father passing away and the business going, out? Are you in your early
Um,
20s?
well,
Out to pasture.
yes,
Sorry.
I was. I think I was, like,
Okay,
24.
so at this point in your life, are you thinking, you know what? My life's a little fucked up. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Did you
Yeah.
start thinking
I
that?
mean, are you holding a normal job at this point, or is this all just your life?
So, at this point in time, I was
Yeah.
not. So, probably, by the time like, the year my dad died is when I stopped working and stuff. Up until that point, I always had a job. I was a certified nursing assistant taking care of elderly
Wow.
people. And, that wasn't good for me either. I mean,
Divert. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, grimy
Yeah.
stuff.
What? So you're in a small town in Pennsylvania growing up, right?
Mhm.
Is the whole
Yep.
town drug fucking ridiculous or?
Yes and no.
Like, did industry leave? I mean, what? Just, I think that's what we're thinking of, maybe.
Well, I just know that when you see documentaries about like West Virginia, it's like
Yeah.
industry left,
Well, Scranton's all anthracite
poverty
coal.
hits, and people just turn to meth or whatever they can get their hands on, and it's really tough to dig themselves out of that. You know,
Yeah. Well, what happened at one point, and I don't remember how old I was or exactly, but the mayor of our town, I don't remember his name anymore, but he started going to advertising in New York City that there was cheap housing in Hazleton. And so
Interesting.
so a lot of
Uh huh.
people started coming from New York
uh,
City. And today that town is not the
Yeah.
town I grew up in.
and that's like 2 hours out
So
of New York, right, or less?
it's like two and a
Okay,
half.
okay, two and
Yep.
a half. Yeah. So a lot of people said, "Hey, well, why are we living here where it costs a ton of money? We don't own anything, and they're poor anyway. We can afford a house in
Yeah.
Hazleton. Boom,
Yeah.
let's do it." And they just brought all the shit with them.
Yeah.
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 So like when I ask, at any point during this period of your life, are you starting to think, I don't want to live this way? Are you thinking it's still manageable? I just got to zigzag a little more to make things work.
No, I mean, at that point, I knew things were bad. I mean, I had tried so many things to get sober. Like I say that, but I never really put in an honest effort for AA. But I tried. I tried the geographical
Yeah.
thing. I moved to Hershey, Pennsylvania, for a while with that guy that I fell in
Uh huh.
love with,
Blues Fest guy.
and yeah, and that turned into a disaster because we were getting high down there and driving back to Hazleton to get the stuff and, but having to steal groceries from the grocery store so we could eat. And he had finally gotten caught doing that. So he went to jail. That got put in the newspaper. I lost my job. So I would always run back to mommy and daddy's
Sure.
house when stuff like this would happen. But I knew my life was
So
pretty
you had that little
unmanageable.
bit of conscience in there that was saying it on the norm, but it
Yes.
just was never enough to make you really go for it.
Had you been to your second rehab at this point yet?
Oh gosh, I'd probably at that point, I'd probably been to 6 of
Really?
them.
Did you get more
Yeah.
trouble with the courts in that time?
Oh, yeah, I was always getting I was not good. I was not a good thief, I was not a good criminal, so, I would get caught and then, you know, go to rehab and hope for the best. And I feel like I hold some sort of record for the longest person ever to be on probation because I think I was on probation for 11
So
years.
it would just continuously renew.
Just
Was
added
your
on.
probation
It added
officer like,
on.
what are you
He
doing?
hated, he hated me. And then, you know, like we had two probation officers, one in Wilkes-Barre,
Mm.
PA, half hour away, one in Hazleton. I was supposed to report on Wednesdays in Hazleton, but I would call him and say, I can't get there. Can I come to Wilkes-Barre Monday? And I'd give myself enough time to clean out my system before I'd go
So smart.
meet with
Because
him at P.
they would piss test you, and
Yeah.
you'd be
Yeah.
clean.
Yeah, he'd buy it every time. But then I started getting real sloppy and not caring,
Yeah.
you know, and I think after my dad died, you know, things got a
Yeah.
lot worse for me, you know, all bets were off. I was living bad before that happened, but once I lost my dad, I just didn't give a shit about
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
So, I was doing all
Did you ever try
kinds
to
of stuff.
pursue any kind of an actual career path? I know you said you were a certified nursing assistant, right?
Mhm.
Did the thought of a career ever give you any motivation to change?
Yeah, I mean, when I lived in Hershey for a while, I went to school online, but I was horrible at it, so I ended up dropping out because getting high was way more
Sure.
Hmm.
important. You know? And ironically, my degree was going to be pharmacy,
Oh
technician.
shit!
I see
I
what you're
was like,
doing
"I'm gonna
there. Yeah, you
go
can't
right
fool
to the
us.
work." So thank God I
So,
dropped out.
listening to your story, it's like it just seems like your whole world revolves around drugs. You know,
Mhm. Yes.
it would seem like such a hard thing to break because of your environmental influences, the way you grew up, you know, knowing nothing else. How did it finally come to a point where you could break away?
I mean,
So, it got to the point where I wanted to die every day. And, you know, I would be with friends, if you will, call them friends, but I would be with these people and we'd be using, and I would tell them that if I OD'd to not bring me back. I mean, I was done. I
So
was done.
you're
And,
inside, you're dying.
yeah, dead. I was dead. I was done. And, you know, and then the stuff I was doing to get money, I mean, my soul was, you know, that soul rot they
sure.
talk about. It was horrible. And so, uh, I asked my probation officer if I could go to rehab one more time. And the reason that I asked, so it had gotten to the point where I stopped calling him. I would get high and I would go see him
Oh,
And so you
high.
were like, fuck it,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. I was just like, you know what? All bets are off. And so I pissed dirty and he called me and I said, can I please have one more chance? And, at that point in time, you know, my brother and I, we ran together. We did everything together. And, him and I, my mom had enough. Finally, she threw us out. And we were living in a tent, not far from her house. He could have thrown the stone to
Yeah.
her house, but we were out there in the tent for, you know, and it was, I think the end of April. So it was cold at
Yeah.
Heck
night,
yeah.
freezing cold, you know? And, I had gone back to my mom's house and I said, "Can you please just drive me to the hospital?" And, she took me up there, and I remember on the way there, she said, "You know, I get so upset with you, I think about driving my car right into a tree," because she
Jesus.
was just like, you know, like, she didn't know what to do anymore, you know? And, we had stolen everything she had that wasn't nailed down, you know? So, we were running through her life, and here she is, widowed, just lost her
Hmm.
husband,
And struggling
and
with
so
her
she
own
dropped me
things
off.
on top of that.
Yes. Yeah. And so we went and I checked into the hospital. I told them I tried to commit suicide and I went into the psych ward
Did
for
you try to commit
I don't
suicide, or
know.
was you just wanted to be part of the system?
So kinda. I had gotten into my mom's house the one day and I found a bottle of pills. And I took the whole bottle of pills. I don't know what they were. It didn't do anything, but so yeah, I
Well,
mean
you took that
I
bottle of
guess I
pills
did
where you're
try.
like, whatever, just whatever happens,
Fuck
happens. I'm not even.
Yeah,
So at that
get
point,
me
your
out.
life is just so shitty. You're like, I don't honestly
Mm.
care if I live or die.
Nope, all my family, nobody wanted nothing to do with me. My mom, my aunts, my uncles, I had no friends. And I remember sitting in that tent with my brother, freezing. I didn't bring any blankets or anything. I would huddle up against him at night to stay warm. And I remember thinking to myself, like, how did I get here? I'm completely alone. And the only person that wants anything to do with me is my brother, who's living the exact same way as I am.
Uh-oh.
Um, so
At
I
any
got to the
point
psych ward and
during this,
oh,
did
go
you
ahead.
ever recall anything from the rehabs or the meetings that was a voice in your head
Mm,
that said that there's a way out? I mean, I know you said I really wanted one more chance at rehab. Do you think there was
yeah.
something you caught there that was like a
Oh
glimmer
yeah.
of light?
Yeah. And not to backtrack, but there was another attempt where I tried to move away also. I had gone to this rehab in York, Pennsylvania, and I met a girl. She came in to speak and I got her number. And when I got kicked out of that rehab for fraternizing, like a good
Yeah.
alkie, I went home to my mom's and then I called that girl and she told me she could get me in a recovery house down there and she came and picked me up and I checked into the recovery house. I pissed dirty again. They still let me in. And I think I was there for about 8 months.
Wow.
Uh, I made it to president of the house. So I was at my own
Were
little
you
room.
clean
I
for
was
that 8
dressed
months?
in. I
Holy
was.
shit.
Oh,
Were you going to meetings on a regular basis?
Yes, I was at
out
that
of your
time. She
element.
became my sponsor. Yep.
Okay. That's pretty
And,
huge.
yes. But then I fell in love again, and I moved out of the recovery house, and I moved into, just somebody's house that rented a couple rooms to people in AA, and there was a girl there who was using, and so it didn't take me very
Sure.
long to pick back up
Mm.
again.
So you're living out in this tent, freezing your ass off, and you're beyond the point of desperation, right? So it's
So
Yes.
hit
either it's
bottom.
either I die or I give it another shot.
Was it
And
your true
Yes.
bottom?
Yep.
If you do you identify that as pretty much that?
I'm not a big believer in bottoms.
Oh,
I I I'm gonna have to say
okay.
no. I don't think
Yeah,
it was because I drank again
yeah,
after that.
sure.
so
Yep.
your mother takes you to the hospital. They put you in the psych ward. Where do you go from there?
Oh my god. So then, um, I remember calling my PO to let him know I was there, and he said, "When you're done there, you're going to jail." And I was like, "Well, let me go to rehab one more time." And so I don't know why, but I picked Syracuse, New York. So let me tell you. So the time that I was in the recovery house, my sponsor and people in AA talk about this prayer thing, and I was
Ah,
not having it. And I would be honest, and I tell my sponsor I wouldn't pray, and we try the old pillow on the floor, shoes on the floor, whatever to get
Hmm.
down there, and I just never would do it. And so this time when I was in the psych ward, I kept thinking to myself, like, okay, I've been in AA. What was I not doing? What was I missing? And I was like, oh, this God thing. So I had knew of a person who some years prior went to the Salvation Army rehab, and I knew it was a Christian-based program. So when they gave me choices of rehabs, this one was free, and my insurance was way done paying for my rehabs, and so was the state. And so, Salvation Army it was. I thought maybe if I go to a Christian-based rehab, something will click for me and I can figure out this God thing. I still thought I had to figure it out at that point.
So what happened? You came
So,
up. You went to the Salvation Army rehab, right?
I was an asshole is what I was. I remember, they'd have Bible studies and stuff. I remember saying one night to the major, the woman that was running the group, we're reading out of the Bible, and I remember saying, "Can we read something that's like real? Because this is just some made up shit."
You're telling them how you
You know,
feel,
You
right?
were
I
making friends.
was I was awful. But, and they would let us sign out and go to meetings, but I wasn't doing that. I was just staying there. And so that particular or I'm sorry, when I was in there, I had a guy walk up to me one day. Now you're not women weren't to talk to
Right.
the guys, but he said, "You look really angry." And he said, "I have a girl's number I want to give you. She'll pick you up and bring you to a meeting." And I thought, all right. And so I called her and she picked me up that night for an AA meeting. And then this is where the story gets
Go ahead.
fun.
What happened?
You got me. I'm listening.
I I ended up at 732 Butternut Street.
Ah.
Okay, and for those
Syracuse,
people out
Syracuse
there,
group.
it is a group in AA that operates a little differently, right?
Yes,
They're hardcore into. Well, why don't you tell us some of the practices that are a little different there? And it's fine because hey, it worked for you, right?
it did. And a lot of people find fault with
Yes.
it, and I'm capable of doing that
Mhm.
too.
Well, it's on
Uh,
Butternut Street, and it is affectionately known throughout the AA community as the Butternutters.
Yeah, there was a
Butternutters,
big news
yes.
story on it.
Yeah.
And it was
Yep,
mostly about they were saying people no medication, right? None of that
yeah,
stuff. You got to be clean of all substances, mind altering substances. So if you're on an
yes,
antidepressant or an anxiety, got to go.
So
yep.
you went into
And
this
that
kind of it's like a little bit of an offshoot of AA, right? It's a
yes,
12-step program. They just have a different approach. But this works for
correct.
you.
Big on the 12-step part.
That shit saved
Yep.
my life.
Structured.
Saved my life. Those people went to the wall for me like nobody's ever
Hmm.
gone to the wall for me before. And at that point I had heard about that group,
Yeah.
I had like never ventured out in Syracuse, so like she drove me there and I didn't know where I was going. And I went to my first meeting and it was great. I remember she sat and talked with me, and then she had to get up and talk to somebody else. So she made sure another woman sat down and talked to me so I wasn't alone and uncomfortable. And that was very significant to me. And So that following weekend, I end up at a picnic and I'm with a bunch of people. And it was me and one other girl from the Salvation Army rehab. She came with me. And we're sitting there, and I said, now at this point, I had signed up for this meeting to be my home
Okay.
group. And so we're all sitting around shooting the shit. And I thought I was going to be funny. And I said, "What do you guys know about that butternut meeting?" And they said, "That's your home group." And I was like, oh no, because I had heard so many
Yeah, yeah.
things. My experience with the medication, that was not my
Yep.
experience. Now, I've heard that, but, I was on medication at
Like
that time
psych
from the
meds?
psych ward.
Okay.
Yeah, and nobody had ever spoken to me about not taking them. However, I after maybe 6 months of being sober again, wanted to
Hmm.
try to see if I could go off of them and if I really needed
Did you end
them.
up living
So,
there for a bit?
I never stayed
Yeah.
there on the floor, but I did end up leaving the Salvation Army early. I walked out, had enough, and for a while I slept on my sponsor's couch.
Wow.
Yep, and then after a little while, there was another girl in my home group who had a room in her apartment that she was looking to rent, so I moved in with her. And, then I had some problems with her boyfriend, so I moved out and I moved into the apartment that I'm in
Now,
currently.
this whole time, are you attending this group on a regular basis? Did you go to
Yes,
any other
every day.
meetings or just this place?
No, we would go to a different meeting on Thursdays, and then we would go to, like, open house or fellowship
Okay,
hall
yeah.
sometimes. Most of the time, the reason we would do that was to look for newcomers to help
Nice. Yeah.
because 'cause they're big
12
on
step.
12
Yep.
Yeah.
step.
Big time.
Yeah,
So, you have
big.
a sponsor at this point? Are
I
you
do.
starting the steps?
Um,
Okay.
no.
Can we just talk
I never
about the
forgot them.
willingness to bring somebody in and let them sleep in your house? And that blows my mind. I mean, what was that like for you?
I mean, it was a little
Yeah,
nerve-wracking. I didn't know her very well, but at this point, I was getting picked up for meetings every single day. They told me they'd be there, they were there. They'd sit with me, talk with me,
pretty
if
strong
I needed.
influences right there.
Yeah, and, like, during the day, I wasn't working at the time, and, I was out of my damn mind.
Yeah,
So I was always with somebody. No, they never if I wasn't comfortable being alone, I wasn't
pretty
alone.
amazing.
Never.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love hearing about that stuff.
Now, why?
yeah,
So, did they delay the steps in that group? Is it
yes.
like the first year you're there? You're just doing the first step.
Um, I never really got talked to about
Mhm.
the steps while I was
Okay.
there. Now, I was only there for about 5, 6 months, and then as soon as I moved off of my sponsor's couch and into that first apartment, I left and got a
Yep.
new home
Okay.
group.
Okay. What drove you away from that group? I mean, obviously, it was very influential your first 5 months in sober.
Yeah. Um, I think it was just I had the meeting started at 7:30. You had to be there at I think it was 7:30. Anyway, you had to be there an hour
Yeah.
early. And then, you had to stay afterwards. So I'd be in AA from 6 o'clock till 10
Take
o'clock at
that.
night every day. Um, and it was very, I don't want to say I was given very specific directions, not suggestions,
Yeah.
directions. And I was about over
Okay.
that,
And so, and then also you're going to other AA meetings, seeing how they work, and you're
Yes.
thinking, I need a change. I need somebody that's not so intense, not so
Yep.
controlling. And so you get out and you start going to other meetings. Do you find that they are helping you, these other meetings?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I left and I joined a group called Uncommon Sense, which is also a lot of people call it a satellite group of the Syracuse group. Um, so it wasn't quite as strict, but some of the same ways, the way that they did things, some of them were similar. It was a lot of people that had left the Syracuse
Mm-hmm.
group and went to
So like
this
a
group.
butternut light. Yeah.
Kinda, but, like, you get there at 7, not 6, you weren't there for 10
Yeah,
hours a day,
yeah.
but it was kind of the same with, like, direction
Right. So
and,
you got to find what works for you, and this worked
yes, and
better.
at that time, I needed that. I needed it. I was there, maybe I think that was my home group for
Oh
6
wow.
years, and,
Okay. So um let me just put a pin in that for a second, because I want to
yeah,
find out, during this time that you're away from your mother's house and the influence of your brother in the town you grew up in. You're in a different city. You're starting to get sober, and you're connecting with a lot of people that are in sobriety. Is
yes.
there any wish to go back? Do you ever go back home?
So I remember very vividly actually one night, when I was living in, the apartment, with my roommate, Kate, and, and I remember I was in my room and I was texting, like, an old friend from back home, and she's talking about starting this dog kennel, and I'm like, "Let's do it. I need to get the hell out of here." And so, I had this whole plan to go out of here, get out of here, and go back to
Okay.
PA. And I don't know why I didn't do that. I often say, like, "Thank
Yeah,
God that I didn't listen to my own
sure.
thinking and that I was willing to listen to
Did you bounce
somebody
it off your
else's."
sponsor?
I think I
Did
did,
she try
yeah.
to talk you out of it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
She was like, "Don't you
Yeah.
think you'll,
Go
like,
right back
maybe
into
die to go
dying.
home?" Yeah. So, I didn't do that, and I'm so thankful because I don't think I'd be here right
So
now
when you're
if I
with
did.
Uncommon Sense, did they start you on the steps?
No.
Still not, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a little, no, no. The answer is no. I think after my first year being there, my sponsor, told me that I had taken a first
Yeah.
step,
Okay.
but there was never any like discussion, you know. I mean, we would talk, we would have, they call them
Yeah.
one-on-ones, you know, where you sit down and talk to somebody, and people would talk to me about it. You know, I would ask people their experiences
Yeah.
with
So
it.
if you're not doing the
Uh,
second and third step, is there a spiritual component to your sobriety during that first year?
there was, I was praying, I was
Oh.
doing the things. However, I wasn't doing them very like consistent.
Hmm.
I've always struggled to
Mhm.
keep that going.
At what point
So
did you start working the steps?
so that sponsor told me I took a first, told me I took a second, and I was like reading my third step, you know, like in the book
Hmm.
where it leads up to it. And so they had me reading that every night. And then I came up on 2 years sober and I got drunk.
How did that
So
happen?
What the?
so um let's see, how
How is
did it
that
happen?
possible? What? An alcoholic
Hey.
drank?
So I was not being
Okay.
honest. I was lying about, you know, I would go home and visit my mom and my brother, and you know, of course, my sponsor would make sure that I had a plan to get to
Yeah.
AA and blah, blah, blah. And so I would go home to PA and I would tell him that I went to these meetings, and I really never did. And it was always these like elaborate stories that I saw somebody that I knew from years
Ooh, good
ago, you
liar
know, like
too.
that.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
like the whole
And so
thing,
your
right?
sponsor, I heard you say him. Your sponsor was a guy.
Hmm?
Yes.
Did
At
that
that
work for you? I know
It did.
they don't like that. The
Oh yeah. He had like 35 years
wow.
sober at
Okay.
that time. And him and I, so he also got sober at the Syracuse group. And when I left the Syracuse group, he left right around the same
Mm,
time. And when I was at the Syracuse group, he was my grand sponsor. So he already like
Sure.
knew a lot about me. And so he was kind of the comfortable person for me to ask to sponsor me when I left. And he had joined the same group. So I
yeah.
kind of just rolled with it.
So
But we were very
what leads up
close,
to
him and
this
I.
drink? Did you do it at home?
I did it in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania. So like I said, I wasn't being honest about certain things. I was seeing this guy also that I had dated like in AA. He was in AA. He had relapsed. And I continued to see him, you know, on the low down. And so then these lies about my trips home and everything. So I had gone home for a weekend to go to that blues festival that I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
You
earlier.
gotta stay away from the blues, man.
And so I'm telling you. So I had gone, and this was the first time I had ever been there sober. I had been going since I was 16
Yeah.
years old, and I'd never been there sober. And I was always like the person at the blues festival because I always brought all the stuff,
Mhm.
you know, to sell. And I was there, and I was nobody anymore. And I was around all the same people I used to go with all the time. And I was like yelling from the rooftop, telling everybody I was 2 years sober, 2 years sober. And I don't know, just like that, I told my brother to go get me a beer out of the cooler, and he did. And I drank it down like
Like you never stopped.
And you were home.
water.
Did drugs come into
Yeah.
the picture again?
No,
Thank God,
so
right?
I
Oof.
don't I drank 3
Mm-hmm.
beers, and then I had, a cherry soaked in, bourbon or something. So, usually I just say I had 3 beers and a
Yeah.
shot. And, so I had kinda stayed up by the stage the whole day. I had brought someone with me from Syracuse, from Alcoholics Anonymous, with me as, like, a chaperone to this thing. I lost her. I'm up at
You
the
ditched
stage,
her?
you know, whatever. Yes, and I got wasted off those 3
Oh,
beers, and I remember my mom coming up to me, as I'm up by the stage, and she put her arm around me, and she said, "I'm so proud of
oh
you."
Jesus.
Because you drank or
And
because
she
she thought you had 2 years?
she thought I had 2
Yeah. Holy
years.
shit.
Oh boy, the
And
guilt,
I just remember, like,
the
oh my god,
guilt.
I
Oh,
remember
I can't
looking up.
imagine.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I remember looking up at the sky with my middle finger, and I was like, "Fuck
Yeah.
you." You know,
Yeah,
like,
AA will ruin
this
your
is
drinking.
man,
So
I couldn't
Tell you.
believe
so
it.
you drink that at the Blues Fest. Do you continue to drink, or do you come home and raise your hand?
No, we went home and I came back to Syracuse the next day. It was the quietest ride of my entire life because I was so worried that she knew, you know, and
You weren't
everybody
worried that she was
was
just
gonna
wandering
find
around
out.
Pennsylvania somewhere looking for you?
And so I told myself nobody would ever
Right.
know.
Right.
And so I came back on a Sunday. I was sponsoring a girl at the time. And
Oof.
I think it took me I think I made it like 2 days before I got honest because, I mean, I had myself, like, physically ill
Yeah.
trying to hold it in, you
Yeah.
know, and I knew I was coming up on speaking for my anniversary, and I thought, "How the
Oh,
hell am I gonna stand
Oh
up?"
God.
my
What
You
a
know?
moral dilemma. So did you
Yeah.
raise your hand and
So I
say,
went that night to Yeah. So I went that night to my home group. I was the treasurer at the time. I showed up with the treasury envelope, walked up to somebody crying, handed it to them, and they knew. So I went into the meeting. Um, the topic was complacency.
mm,
And then at that meeting, they'd play tag, you
yeah.
know, where you call them worker. And the chairperson picked me first.
Oh, Jesus. So did you
And
confess?
there was her middle
my
finger.
God.
To
Seriously.
God. I
Right.
was like, come on. I did. I got honest. And then you know, I had to tell my sponsee and I had to start all over again.
And
And yet you
And I
still
didn't
started
do it.
over and did the thing. Clearly. Was this the last
I
time?
did, but
Yeah.
yes, that was the last
I,
and
I, I have dreams about that, to be honest with you. Like,
I have drinking dreams.
it scares the shit out of
Every
me.
time I drink in a drinking dream, I feel so shitty.
Oh my God.
You
Like
know?
ruined.
I know. So can you tell us a little bit about how your life has changed since you got
oh my
sober?
god, man. I don't even know where to
I mean, I
start.
want to know because you were recommended to us
And you know what? You
Oh,
strike
yeah.
me as a very intelligent,
as usual.
together person, not
Well,
not a heroin addict. You know, you just seem like a really just a smart, you know, which we are as
We are
addicts and
yeah,
alcoholics. We're smart, we're funny, we're likable. Boy, but
crafty.
get us with drugs and alcohol, we become stupid, idiot, assholes.
Yet we still think we're smart.
horrible.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We think we're real
So
smart.
how has your life changed?
Oh, man. You know, I came back and I remember telling people I didn't think I could start over
Yeah.
again. You know, people would tell me I needed to stay out of my own way and hang on real tight because they said a lot of times people go out and drink like that, like a couple beers, and then they figure it wasn't worth it. I might as well finish the job, you
Yeah.
know? And so I was so scared. But so at that point I decided I wasn't gonna date anymore. I was gonna follow the rule, you know, don't do anything for a year. Um, and I didn't for 2 years. I didn't date
Okay.
anybody. And then I started seeing this guy and I wasn't being honest about it again. And I was coming right up on my 2-year anniversary and it scared the
Again.
shit out of me.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
saw it.
I was like, I'm doing it again. So I got honest about that and you know, carried on. But um I went back to college
Wow.
for human services and I just graduated last summer with a 4.0
Fucking
Congratulations.
GPA.
amazing.
God,
So that was
we got
pretty
chills.
that was pretty rad, you
Rad.
know.
Yeah.
I didn't think I could do that. Um that guy that I was dating is now my husband. I got married last
Awesome.
January. Um he's in AA too and we're both out of our minds.
But sober,
um but
right?
sober. Yep. I've got two beautiful stepsons, 9 and 5, Isaiah and Prince.
Well, you
Um
know, you look healthy.
Yeah.
You do. You look healthy.
yeah.
And for anybody that would met you now for the first time, if they had heard that story, they'd be going, "Are you shitting me?" You know?
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Sometimes I think like, man, because my godfather is out of prison. He's been out of prison now for about 6
Mm-hmm.
years. And sometimes I think like we need to either write a book or get a Netflix series
I
because
know.
nobody
Here's your
will
start.
believe this
Now, is
shit,
is
you
he
know?
sober?
He is.
Wow.
Yeah,
Shit. What about your
yeah.
brother?
But he's still real paranoid, though. Like, if I try to bring something up that I remember from when I was a kid, he'll hang up
Yeah.
on me because he thinks that the feds are still
Yeah.
listening to it. Maybe they are, I don't know. Who
And
knows?
how is your brother doing?
My brother, he still
Yeah.
struggles. He's, he doesn't go to meetings. He won't go to meetings. I've brought him here to Syracuse, and tried to help him, and he went back out. So
Yeah, people aren't ready till
he
they're
lives
ready,
with
right?
my mom, and
And you can
yeah, and
understand that.
he's still. Oh yeah, definitely,
Well, we've come to the end of our
100.
time, Alyssa, but your story is fan. It should be a Netflix series.
I'll say.
That would be good, It would be fucking dramatic,
Oh,
Oh my god. Well, there is a Netflix show about some woman. I forget the name of it, but it's like literally she had a farm, she had a bar, she had a car dealership. I was like, what the hell? Did she know my Uncle Jim?
right? The writers
So
did. So, well, we'd like to
man,
thank you for coming on and sharing your story with
yeah,
us.
wonderful.
Somebody's
Gosh.
going to hear it and relate to it. That's for sure. So,
Congratulations on your accomplishment there.
Yeah.
So it's a big
well,
deal.
thank you guys for
It's a big deal.
asking me. I
yeah,
gotta give Marianne a shout out
Yeah.
for
yeah, nice.
you
So
know.
until next time on the Glum Lot podcast, I'm Mark.
I'm Brett. And you're who?
Oh,
There we
Alyssa.
go.
As we wrap up another episode of the Glum Lot podcast, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who tuned in today. Navigating the path to recovery from alcohol and other substances is a journey filled with challenges, triumphs, and self-discovery. Remember, we're not affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous, but we're here to provide a safe space for open conversations about the complexities of recovery. Your stories, courage, and resilience inspire us and our listeners alike. If you or someone you know is on the transformative journey, know that you're not alone. Join us next time as we continue to explore the diverse facets of recovery. Until then, stay strong, stay connected, and remember that each day is a step towards a brighter, sober tomorrow. Thank you for being part of the Glum Lot community.